The sound of fists pounding against solid oak echoed through the mountain air like thunder. "You will open this door right now," screamed 45-year-old Diane Whitmore, her perfectly manicured nails scraping against the cabin's wooden frame. Her face was flushed crimson, a stark contrast to her platinum blonde bob that had started the morning in pristine condition but now hung in disheveled strands around her sweating face. Behind the door, 38-year-old Marcus Thompson stood completely still, his hand hovering over the deadbolt. He could hear his 12-year-old daughter Zoe's nervous breathing from the living room, where she'd been doing homework just moments before this chaos erupted. Through the peephole, Marcus watched as Diane's entourage of 5 adults and 3 children pressed closer to his front porch, their designer camping gear scattered across his property like they owned the place. "Sir, we have every right to be here," Diane shrieked, her voice cracking with entitlement. "I am the president of Pinebrook Mountain HOA, and you will comply." What Diane Whitmore didn't know was that her next 30 minutes would become the most humiliating experience of her privileged life, all because she made the fatal mistake of assuming that a successful black engineer who'd saved for 15 years to buy his dream cabin would simply roll over and let her steamroll his property rights. Let me take you back to where this all began, because what happened next will have you questioning everything you think you know about HOA power trips and racial profiling in America. Marcus Thompson had been living his dream for exactly 8 months. After spending his entire adult life in cramped Chicago apartments, working double shifts as a structural engineer and saving every penny, he'd finally purchased a beautiful 3-bedroom log cabin in Pinebrook Mountain, Colorado. The property sat on 2 pristine acres, complete with a stream running through the backyard and a view of the Rocky Mountains that looked like something out of a postcard. For Marcus, this wasn't just real estate, it was generational wealth. It was a place where his daughter Zoe could experience nature, where his elderly mother could visit and breathe clean mountain air, and where he could finally build the life he'd dreamed of since childhood. He'd done everything by the book, got pre-approved for the mortgage, hired the best inspector, and even joined the local HOA without complaint, paying his dues on time every single month. What Marcus didn't realize was that Diane Whitmore, the self-appointed queen of Pinebrook Mountain, had been watching him from day one. And she did not approve. Diane had moved to Pinebrook Mountain 12 years ago when her tech executive husband landed a 7-figure buyout from his startup. She'd immediately appointed herself HOA president, running unopposed because, frankly, nobody else wanted to deal with the drama. In her mind, she was protecting property values and maintaining community standards. In reality, she was building a little kingdom where she could control every blade of grass, every fence post, and every person who dared to call Pinebrook Mountain home. From the moment Marcus moved in, Diane had been looking for violations. She'd driven by his property 17 times in the first month, taking photos of his mailbox, measuring the height of his grass with a ruler, and documenting every vehicle that entered his driveway. When she couldn't find legitimate violations, she'd started making them up, claiming his outdoor lights were too bright, his firewood pile was improperly stacked, and his daughter's bicycle was an eyesore when left on the front porch. But Marcus wasn't backing down. Every ridiculous citation got a professional, polite response. Every made-up violation got documented and contested through proper channels. And every time Diane expected him to crumble, Marcus stood his ground with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his rights and wasn't afraid to defend them. The breaking point came on a crisp Saturday morning in October. Marcus was outside with Zoe, teaching her how to properly stack firewood for the winter, when they heard the unmistakable sound of multiple vehicles pulling into their driveway. "Dad, who's that?" Zoe asked, her 12-year-old instincts immediately sensing something was wrong. Marcus looked up to see a caravan of luxury SUVs, 2 Escalades and a Range Rover, parking directly on his property. Out stepped Diane Whitmore, dressed like she was heading to a country club brunch, followed by what appeared to be her extended family, her husband Richard, her 2 teenage sons, her sister and brother-in-law, and their 3 young children. "Good morning, Marcus," Diane called out with fake sweetness, already walking toward his front door like she owned the place. "We're having our annual family camping trip, and we've decided to use your property this year." Marcus blinked twice, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Oh, don't play dumb," Diane laughed, gesturing for her family to start unloading their gear. We've been camping in this area for years, long before you moved in. We have traditional usage rights to this land. Traditional usage rights? Marcus repeated slowly, his engineering mind trying to process the legal gibberish she was spouting. Ma'am, this is private property. My private property. You can't just decide to camp here. Diane's fake smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. Actually, according to HOA bylaws, community members have access to common areas for recreational purposes. I've reviewed the documentation. Show me, Marcus said simply. I don't have to show you anything, Diane snapped, her mask finally slipping. I'm the HOA president, and I'm telling you how this works. My family has been coming to these mountains since before you people started moving in here. We have rights. The phrase, you people, hung in the mountain air like smoke from a wildfire. Marcus felt his daughter step closer to his side, her small hand finding his. He could see his neighbors starting to emerge from their cabins, drawn by the commotion. Ma'am, Marcus said, his voice deadly calm, you have exactly 60 seconds to get off my property before I call the sheriff. That's when Diane Whitmore made the decision that would destroy her reputation forever. Instead of leaving, she doubled down. You will not threaten me. Diane shrieked, her voice carrying across the mountainside like a wounded animal. Richard, get the equipment out of the cars. Kids, start setting up the tents by the stream. We're not going anywhere. Marcus watched in disbelief as this woman's family actually began following her orders, unpacking camping chairs, portable grills, and enough gear for a week-long stay. Her husband Richard, a pale, thin man who looked like he'd never disagreed with his wife in his life, was actually helping unload coolers full of food. This is insane, Marcus muttered, pulling out his phone. Zoe, go inside and lock the door. I'm not going anywhere without you, Dad, his daughter said firmly, and Marcus felt a surge of pride even in the midst of this chaos. As Marcus started dialing 911, Diane rushed toward him, her perfectly manicured hands reaching for his phone. You put that down right now. There's no need to involve law enforcement in a simple property dispute. A property dispute? Marcus held his phone up out of her reach. Lady, you're trespassing on private property with 8 people and attempting to establish an illegal campsite. This isn't a dispute, it's a crime. We have permission. Diane screamed, her face turning an alarming shade of purple. We have standing HOA authorization for recreational land use. From who? Marcus shouted back, his patience finally snapping. From yourself? You authorized yourself to use my property? The crowd of neighbors that had gathered was now recording everything on their phones. Marcus could see old Mrs. Patterson from next door shaking her head in disgust, and the young couple from across the road were openly laughing at Diane's meltdown. That's when Diane made her second critical error. You listen to me, boy, she snarled, stepping so close to Marcus that her breath fogged his glasses. I don't care how much money you threw around to buy this place, or what kind of affirmative action program got you approved for a mortgage. This is our mountain, our community, and you will respect the way we do things here. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing through the pine trees. Marcus looked down at this middle-aged white woman who had just called a grown man boy and cited affirmative action in front of his 12-year-old daughter and half the neighborhood. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was so quiet that people had to strain to hear him. Get property now. What Diane Whitmore didn't know was that Marcus Thompson wasn't just any engineer. He was a structural engineer who specialized in commercial construction law. He'd spent 15 years dealing with property disputes, zoning violations, and municipal regulations. He knew exactly what rights he had, exactly what laws were being broken, and exactly how to document everything for maximum legal impact. As Diane continued her tirade, Marcus was methodically recording everything on his phone while simultaneously texting his lawyer, his insurance company, and the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. But his masterstroke was the group text he sent to every single member of the Pinebrook Mountain HOA. Emergency HOA meeting. Current president trespassing on private property with family. Claiming unauthorized usage rights. Need immediate board intervention. Video evidence attached. Within minutes, Marcus's phone was buzzing with responses from fellow HOA members who were absolutely horrified by what they were seeing. It turned out that Diane had been telling people for months that Marcus was difficult and non-compliant, but seeing her actual behavior was opening a lot of eyes. Meanwhile, Diane's family was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. Her teenage sons were muttering about how weird this was. Her sister was asking if they should maybe just go to the actual campground, and even her husband Richard was starting to look like he wanted to disappear into the mountain forest. "Diane, honey," Richard finally spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we should just go to Rocky Mountain National Park like we planned?" "Absolutely not," Diane roared, whirling on her husband with fury that made everyone take a step back. "I am not backing down to some uppity engineer who thinks he can waltz into our community and start making demands. I am the president of this HOA, and what I say goes." That's when Marcus played his ace card. "Actually," he said, still recording, "according to the HOA bylaws, which I have memorized since you've been citing them at me for 8 months, any HOA president who uses their position for personal gain or harassment of community members can be removed by emergency vote. And since you just admitted on camera that you're using your presidential authority to justify trespassing on private property." He let the sentence hang in the air like a noose. Diane's face went white. That's not how it works." Section 4.7 of the Community Charter, Marcus continued calmly. "Emergency removal procedures. I've already sent the documentation to all HOA members. We can call for a vote as soon as we have a quorum." As if summoned by his words, cars began pulling into Marcus's driveway, not to join Diane's illegal camping trip, but to witness what was rapidly becoming the most spectacular HOA presidential meltdown in Colorado history. The first person to arrive was Janet Rodriguez, the HOA treasurer and a retired federal judge who'd moved to Pinebrook Mountain for the peace and quiet. She took one look at the camping gear scattered across Marcus's property and Diane's wild-eyed expression and immediately understood the situation. "Diane Marie Whitmore," Janet said in the voice she'd once used to sentence white-collar criminals, "what in God's name do you think you're doing?" "Janet." Diane's voice cracked with relief. "Thank goodness you're here. This man is trying to prevent legitimate HOA recreational activities, and he's threatening to call the police." Janet looked at the camping chairs, the grills, the coolers, and the family of 8 people who were obviously planning to spend several days on Marcus's private property. Then she looked at Marcus, who was still calmly recording everything while his daughter stood beside him with the dignity of someone twice her age. "Marcus," Janet said formally, "did you give permission for anyone to use your property for camping?" "No, ma'am, I did not." "Diane, do you have written authorization from the property owner for this activity?" "I don't need authorization," Diane shrieked. "I'm the president. I have standing authority for community land use." "This isn't community land, Diane. This is private property. It's all community land. Everything in Pinebrook Mountain falls under HOA jurisdiction." Janet closed her eyes and took a deep breath, the way judges do when they're about to deliver a sentence that's going to ruin someone's life. "Diane, you've just admitted to trespassing, attempted illegal occupation of private property, and abuse of HOA authority. On camera. In front of witnesses." More cars were arriving now. Tom and Linda Chin from Pine Street, the Johnsons from Mountain View Drive, even cranky old Bob Martinez who never came to HOA meetings because he thought they were a waste of time and taxpayer money. Word was spreading through the community like wildfire, and everyone wanted to see Diane Whitmore's spectacular fall from grace. The final nail in Diane's coffin came when Deputy Sheriff Williams arrived in his patrol car, having received multiple calls about a domestic disturbance involving trespassing and possible harassment. Deputy Williams was a 20-year veteran who'd seen every kind of property dispute imaginable, but even he looked bewildered as he surveyed the scene. A family of 8 illegally camping on someone's private property while the property owner stood calmly nearby, documenting everything with his phone. "Ma'am," Deputy Williams addressed Diane, "I'm going to need you and your family to pack up your belongings and leave this property immediately." "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding," Diane said, suddenly switching to her sweet, innocent voice. I'm the HOA president, and we're just exercising our community recreational rights. Deputy Williams looked at Marcus. Sir, did you give permission for these people to be on your property? No, sir, I did not. I've asked them to leave multiple times. Then it's trespassing, the deputy said simply. Pack it up, folks. You've got 10 minutes before I start writing citations. What happened next was like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. As Diane's family scrambled to pack up their camping gear under the watchful eye of a sheriff's deputy, the HOA members who had gathered began an impromptu emergency meeting right there in Marcus's driveway. I call for an immediate vote of no confidence in our current HOA president, Janet Rodriguez announced, her judicial training taking over. All in favor? 7 hands shot up immediately. The only person who didn't vote was Bob Martinez, who was too busy recording everything on his phone and muttering, "This is better than Netflix." Motion carries, Janet declared. Diane Whitmore, you are hereby removed from your position as HOA president, effective immediately. Diane, who had been screaming at her teenage sons to pack faster and stop looking embarrassed, whirled around at Janet's words. You can't do that. I'm the president. I've been president for 12 years. You were the president, Tom Chin corrected. Past tense. This is illegal. This is a conspiracy. You're all ganging up on me because I was trying to preserve our community values. Community values? Linda Chin stepped forward, and Marcus noticed she was holding her phone up, recording. Diane, what community values involve camping on someone's private property without permission? Traditional usage rights. Diane screamed, her voice becoming more unhinged by the minute. We've been using these mountains for recreation for years, long before people like him started moving in. The silence that followed was so complete that you could hear the stream babbling in Marcus's backyard. Even Diane's own family members were staring at her in horror. People like him? Janet Rodriguez repeated slowly. Diane, what exactly do you mean by people like him? For the first time all day, Diane seemed to realize she might be in trouble. Her eyes darted around the circle of neighbors, all of whom were staring at her with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. I didn't mean, that's not what I... Ma'am, Deputy Williams interrupted, I think it's time for you and your family to leave. Now. But Diane Whitmore had one final card to play, the nuclear option that would guarantee her complete social destruction. Fine, she shrieked, throwing her designer camping chair onto the ground with enough force to break one of the legs. You all want to side with him? You want to destroy everything we've built here? You want to let these people take over our community? Then you can all go to hell. She pointed directly at Marcus, her fingers shaking with rage. You think you've won something? You think buying a house makes you belong here? This is white America, and you will never be welcome in our mountains. The gasp that rose from the crowd was audible. Even her own husband took a step away from her. Marcus, who had remained calm through everything else, finally spoke. Ma'am, he said quietly, you just committed a hate crime on camera, in front of a police officer, with about 15 witnesses. I hope your next HOA meeting is worth it. What followed was the most efficient packing job in camping history. Diane's family loaded their gear with the speed of people trying to escape a natural disaster, while Diane herself stood frozen in the middle of Marcus's driveway, apparently just realizing what she'd done. Deputy Williams was on his radio, calling for backup and reporting a possible hate crime incident requiring documentation. Janet Rodriguez was already on her phone with the state HOA oversight board, reporting Diane's actions and requesting an investigation into her tenure as president. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source, Diane's own 16-year-old son, Tyler. Mom, he said, his voice cracking with emotion, what the hell is wrong with you? Tyler, don't you dare speak to me like that. No, seriously. What is wrong with you? This man bought a house. He pays his taxes. His daughter goes to school with my friends. And you're acting like some kind of racist, finished his younger brother Kyle, who was 14 and apparently old enough to understand exactly what their mother had just done to their family's reputation. I am not racist, Diane screamed. I'm protecting our property values. I'm maintaining community standards. By camping on someone's lawn without permission? Tyler shot back. By calling a grown man boy? By talking about white America like we're living in the 1950s. Richard Whitmore, who had been silent through most of the ordeal, finally found his voice. Diane, get in the car. We're leaving. Now. I'm not going anywhere until... Car. It was the first time anyone had ever heard Richard raise his voice, and the effect was immediate. Diane, suddenly realizing she was completely alone, finally climbed into the passenger seat of their Range Rover. As the caravan of vehicles pulled out of Marcus's driveway, leaving tire tracks in his carefully maintained gravel, Deputy Williams approached Marcus with a notebook. Sir, I'm going to need a full statement about today's events. Based on what I witnessed and recorded, we'll be filing charges for trespassing, attempted illegal occupation, and hate crime enhancement. Marcus nodded, still holding his daughter's hand. Officer, I have everything documented on video, along with text messages and witness statements. Dad, Zoe spoke up for the first time since the chaos began. Are we safe here? Before Marcus could answer, Janet Rodriguez stepped forward. Honey, you and your father aren't just safe here, you're family. And we protect our family. The other HOA members murmured their agreement, and Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since moving to Colorado. He felt like he was truly home. The fallout from Diane Whitmore's spectacular meltdown was swift and comprehensive. Within 24 hours, videos of the incident had gone viral on social media, with hashtag Pinebrook Mountain Karen trending on Twitter and accumulating over 2 million views. The local news picked up the story, then the national news, and suddenly the quiet mountain community was the center of a nationwide conversation about HOA abuse and racial harassment. Diane faced criminal charges for trespassing, attempted illegal occupation, and hate crime enhancement, charges that would result in a $15,000 fine, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent restraining order preventing her from coming within 500 feet of Marcus's property. Her husband Richard filed for divorce within the week, citing irreconcilable differences and public embarrassment. Their sons changed their last names and moved in with their father. But the most satisfying consequence was what happened to Diane's precious HOA presidency. The emergency removal vote was just the beginning. The state HOA Oversight Board launched a full investigation into her 12-year tenure and discovered a pattern of selective enforcement, harassment, and financial mismanagement that resulted in the entire HOA leadership being restructured. Janet Rodriguez was elected as the new president in a unanimous vote, with Marcus Thompson volunteering to serve as vice president. Their first official act was to revise the HOA bylaws to include strict anti-harassment and anti-discrimination policies, with automatic removal for any board member who violated them. Marcus's property became something of a local landmark, not because of the incident, but because of what he did with it afterward. He used the media attention to launch a nonprofit organization called Mountain Justice, dedicated to helping people of color navigate property ownership and HOA disputes in predominantly white communities. His cabin became a gathering place for community meetings, children's educational programs, and annual celebrations of diversity in mountain living. Zoe Thompson, now 13, became something of a local celebrity herself. Her calm dignity during the crisis impressed everyone who met her, and she began speaking at schools about standing up to bullying and supporting family during difficult times. The mountain community that had initially seemed hostile became her strongest support system. As I wrap up this incredible story, I want you to think about what really happened that day in Pinebrook Mountain. This wasn't just about one racist HOA president having a meltdown, it was about what happens when a community decides to stand up for what's right. Marcus Thompson could have backed down. He could have let Diane intimidate him into leaving, or found somewhere else to live, or just quietly endured the harassment like so many people do every day. Instead, he stood his ground, documented everything, and forced his community to confront their own values. The neighbors who gathered that day could have stayed inside, minded their own business, and let Marcus handle it alone. Instead, they came outside, witnessed what was happening, and chose to act. They removed a toxic leader, restructured their organization, and created a more welcoming community for everyone. And Diane Whitmore? She made the classic mistake of people who've never been challenged. She assumed that being loud and aggressive would always work. She assumed that her position as HOA president gave her unlimited power. Most dangerously, she assumed that her racism would be quietly tolerated by people who looked like her. She was wrong on all counts. The lesson here isn't complicated. Bullies rely on silence, isolation, and complicity to maintain their power. The moment a community decides to stop enabling that behavior, the bully becomes powerless. If you're facing harassment from an HOA, a neighbor, or anyone else who thinks their position gives them the right to treat you badly, remember Marcus Thompson. Document everything. Know your rights. Build alliances with reasonable people. And never, ever back down from defending your home and your family. Your story matters. Your dignity matters. And sometimes, standing up for yourself doesn't just change your own life, it changes an entire community. What would you have done in Marcus's situation? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when faced with injustice. Thanks for watching. If this story inspired you, check out my video about the HOA board member who tried to foreclose on a veteran's home, or the property manager who learned the hard way that discrimination has consequences. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story about justice, community, and the power of standing up for what's right. Remember, your home is your castle, and nobody, not even an HOA president, has the right to make you feel unwelcome in it.